He knelt on the diner floor and felt a piece of himself come back. The turquoise paint glowed like a memory. The jukebox hummed an old tune that seemed to slow the room, and steam rose from coffee cups in soft halos as if the ordinary air had been made sacred. Cal Mercer sat in the corner booth like a stone marker of a life lived hard, denim vest frayed, tattoos like faded maps across his forearms, eyes that had learned to look through people rather than at them. And yet, when the thin woman with the tangled hair stumbled in clutching a sleepy child, the whole room condensed into the weight of that single overlooked moment. The woman moved like a winter wind, shaky, quiet, searching for an edge to rest on. And when she knelt beside his table to ask, humiliated and gentle, for the leftovers for her daughter, everything held its breath. The waitress's pencil paused over an order pad. The other diners' conversations thinned into a static undercurrent, and the jukebox seemed to fade. Cal's fries and steaks steamed between them, ordinary food carrying the extraordinary possibility of mercy, and a long, buried ache slid up through him, a memory of a daughter he hadn't seen in years, a life he'd walked away from in younger, more violent storms. He looked at the little face pressed to the woman's sweater, at the mottled chill on her cheeks, and for the first time in a long while the past and present collided with such force that the only possible motion was toward repair. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Loom. Cal rose without a shout or a show, the kind of movement that made people in the diner shift their eyes as if they were watching a quiet ritual. He pushed his plate across the table with hands that had steered motorcycles and steered away from promises, then walked to the counter and spoke with the cook in small, measured gestures that carried an authority born of being seen by few. The cook nodded and later handed him 2 steaming takeout boxes and a bottle of milk like a benediction, and when Cal returned and knelt down beside the woman, tattooed, rough-knuckled, a biker humbled to the level of a mother in need, the moment felt cinematic and small all at once, like a close-up on a soul. He placed the boxes in the woman's trembling hands and, without fanfare, reached into his vest for a folded bill. It was neither a fortune nor charity in a headline sense, but it was a calculated, hard-won offering that could buy a week of dinners and, perhaps more important, buy tonight's sleep from the sharp teeth of hunger. The woman's face folded into something beyond gratitude, a tide of relief and shame and disbelief, and the child looked up with the slow, wary trust of someone who had been kept safe by strangers before and born anew when warmth arrived. The other bikers at the back booths lowered their heads like a congregation witnessing a small miracle, and the waitress, who had earlier been a study in reticence, came over with a steaming cup of cocoa and a paper napkin, hands surprisingly careful. Outside, the sky leaned toward evening and the neon sign over the diner buzzed with tired light. Inside, forks paused and the diner's ordinary rhythm was altered by the shape of one small act. Cal sat back down and watched the pair leave, the woman clasping the boxes to her chest as if holding a future in both hands, and for the first time in years he let the corner of his mouth curl into something softer than a smirk, the kind of smile that comes from a man who has been surprised by his own capacity to care. The rest of the night felt different because of that exchange. The jukebox found its volume again and the hum of conversation returned. But there was a new texture to the sounds, a thicker, more human grain under the plates and cups. Cal's mind was a loop of memory and possibility. The estranged daughter whose face he still saw when engines fell quiet, the wife who had left because promises and apologies had no legs long enough to catch up with the man he had been. The long trail of choices that had worn him down into the person who now gave away his meal without a second thought. There was no redemption loudly announced, only this small correction, this retilting of the scales. But sometimes the tenderness that changes a life is quiet and unadvertised, arriving in a paper box and a folded bill rather than a grand speech as he left under the diner's flicker. The air cut like glass and the motorcycle hummed awake beneath him, carrying him through streets that blurred into shadow and streetlight. Riding home, Cal felt the weight of years shifting like luggage finding a new strap. The night wind was a contraband kind of forgiveness, scattering the brittle things that clung to him and leaving behind something clean and strange, a hope he had not allowed himself to name. He thought of the child's small fingers curled against the sweater, of how close he had come so many times to being that man who abandoned instead of stayed, and how one simple decision could hinge a life toward mercy. The road hummed beneath him, the town receded, and for the first time in a very long while his regret was not a chain but a compass. The tightness in the diner had seeped into him like warmth into cold hands. He imagined, impossibly, that somewhere his own daughter might be sitting across a table from someone who would not look away, and the image steadied him. The story that unfolded in that retrolit booth was not an epilogue or a tidy ending but a hinge. An ordinary afternoon turned consequential because a man chose presence over pride, because a woman's courage to ask met a man's willingness to remember. It is the kind of thing that leaves traces, people wiping their eyes behind coffee cups, a waitress holding her chin as if cataloging bravery, bikers at the back booths swallowing a truth about their own hearts, and it becomes a quiet rumor of hope that moves down the booth line and out into the night. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and comment, and tell us where you're watching from so we can appreciate you. In the distance, the neon sign buzzed. The engines faded into the dark and cold road on, carrying a small, stubborn warmth that promised, for once, that missing pieces might be found not in grand gestures but in the simple stubbornness of being human.